But to the political news today, Barnaby Joyce, our new Deputy Prime Minister. Now, for me, the big question is, of course, what is he going to do for you, for the country? But to some journalists today, policy, delivery, national future, boring. They're more interested in checking a politician's private life. Well, if they're conservative, that is, and sort of measuring it against some sort of woke measuring tape to see if they are saints, as if that really counted. Barnaby Joyce would be the first to say he's not a saint at all. He's a Catholic. Several years ago, his marriage collapsed. Happens to a lot of people. He's embarrassed. He left his wife and daughters and moved in with a woman who was his staffer and is now his wife and the mother of 2 sons. And then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, will he claim back then to be horrified by all that? He forced Barnaby Joyce to quit. And so what, you might think now, 3 years on, moving on, happens to millions of families, whether you like it or not. The big topic for journalists at Joyce's press conference, for some of them, was, would women forgive Barnaby Joyce? Had he learned his lesson? Would he now try to scrap the office bonk ban that Turnbull had ordered? Honestly, you'd think journalists were themselves angels who never let their pants down, but Joyce had to do the whole shame, shame, shame walk all over again.
I acknowledge my faults, and I resigned as I should, and I did. I've spent 3 years on the backbench, and I hope I come back a better person. I don't walk away from the fact that you have to have time to consider not only the effect on yourself, but more importantly, the effect on others. I've done that. I don't want to dwell on the personal, except to say, hopefully one learns from their mistakes and makes a better person of themselves.
Joining me is the political panel, Michael Kroger, former Victorian Liberal President, and Michael Costa, former New South Wales Labor Treasurer. Michael Kroger, first, is Barnaby Joyce damaged goods?
Yes, like anyone who's been in politics a long time, he is a little bit, but he'll overcome that. He won today because he's a better retail politician than McCormack. There's a million other theories and things, but, Joyce can get a message across. He's a great retail politician. When people talk, he listens. McCormack, who people say is I don't know him, but they say he's an outstanding person, but Michael could never get, the message across. He just doesn't have, the camera doesn't love Michael McCormack in the way that Barnaby's message gets across. And I suppose the other point I make, Andrew, is what we now know in Australian politics. If you're a centre-right leader, you cannot exist with a constant barrage against you by Sky News commentators, because too many Liberal Party and National Party members watch, too many politicians watch and are influenced by it. And you look at who's leading the debate. You've got Canavan out on this network, Joyce on this network, repeatedly talking to their members and talking to the MPs in the same way that Fitzgibbon is leading the debate within the Labor Party. So whilst other stations might have bigger audiences, they've got bigger audiences but not so engaged. The Sky audience are very engaged, and they talk amongst themselves and they talk to the politicians. And boy, it's making a difference in centre-right politics in this country.
Michael Costa, same sort of question to you. Is the government now stronger for having Joyce replace Michael McCormack as Deputy Prime Minister, or is it weaker? Is this a good day for Labor?
I think it's a good day for the government, Andrew. Michael Kroger's completely correct. He's a better retail politician. He can get the message across. But look, there is an underlying issue that I sort of differ on with Michael and possibly yourself. The National Party's got some real challenges. In New South Wales, for example, it's losing seats in the gentrified country areas to the Greens. And even in some of the heartland areas, you've got the shooters and fishers and One Nation, and even, Joel Fitzgibbon. I think he'll get a swing to him at the next election because he's positioned himself in that seat in a very sensible way, given the the socio-economic characteristics of that. So I think the Nationals have still got challenges that I don't think are going to be resolved by Barnaby being there. But from a government point of view, he clearly is a better spokesman for the coalition.
But,
Andrew, can I just mention one other point?
Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say this. Barnaby comes back with a lot of people nervous about what type of leader he's going to be because he does shoot from the hip. Others on this network have already made this comment, and Joyce probably doesn't have the power within the party to do this, and I understand that. But boy, what a difference it would make to his standing if he overrode the New South Wales division and got John Anderson pre-selected in the Senate. I mean, the fellow that won that pre-selection must be an absolutely outstanding person because you're offered John Anderson and you can afford to refuse him. Boy, that would do Joyce an immense amount of good. And I don't think he'll do it. Probably can't do it, as I said. But boy, that would revolutionise people's views of the National Party in the centre-right in this country if he brought Anderson back. And all of the connotations Anderson brings back, the whole Howard era, father figure, serious, good retail, rural person, that would make Joyce's leadership go to another level if he was able to bring fight his own party and bring Anderson back on the Senate ticket. That would do an immense amount of good for Barnaby Joyce.
Michael Costa, both of you have been saying, look, the Nationals are going to be better, stronger, more potent with Barnaby Joyce there, better salesman. I was hoping you'd also change the product, to be honest, more global warming scepticism. But I have to say, I wasn't bowled over by the Prime Minister's effusive welcoming of this development. He didn't look terribly happy, I don't think. What do you think he would have actually thought as he watched on, stuck in quarantine in the lodge?
Oh, look, I mean, he came
well,
out
I think
and backed
Michael Costa
McCormack.
first?
He backed McCormack. Yeah, he backed McCormack a couple of days ago. So, in a sense, his position is slightly embarrassing. But having said that, I think he's got to look ahead. I mean, he's better off having Barnaby Joyce out there working those country seats. At least he can get a message across. I think the issue in terms of this target of, no net emissions by 2050, I mean, it's a target. It's wishy-washy. You and I and other sensible people realise the economic consequences of it, but they could fiddle this around from a political strategy and maybe do something to combat some of the inner city liberal politicians that need some cover on the issue. But look, having said that, I think Morrison will be happy with the result.
Yeah, we'll see. Michael Kroger, just going to ask you about a little other trouble that Scott Morrison had today. I don't know whether it amounts to much, but Sydney Morning Herald said that Morrison's office worked for weeks to arrange for him during his visit to the G7 meeting in Britain last week to visit the town where his fifth great-grandfather came from before being arrested and transported to Australia in the First Fleet. And he laid flowers on the local graveyard of relatives, etc. Now, there's criticism that Morrison's a hypocrite, doing a little tourism. We're banned from even travelling from Australia to just about anywhere. I thought his response today was actually not quite straight. Have a listen.
After the G7, on the way to the airport, we stopped in another place, which just happens to be where my fifth great-grandfather was from. So I think it was pretty innocent.
It didn't just happen to be. I mean, his team had scouted out for weeks beforehand. But this is a storm in a teacup.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Keating went to Ireland in 1991. I think he was between jobs. But he went to visit his relative's birthplace when he was a federal member of Parliament. Oh, big deal, Andrew. He goes to visit the place of his fifth great-grandfather. I mean, this is a story in the Sydney Morning Herald. Why wouldn't he have gone? You'd think he didn't care about his forebears if he didn't go. It's half an hour away, for goodness sake. That this is an issue, for goodness sake. The Sydney Morning Herald, by the way, didn't properly cover what was an issue, which was the guts of Morrison turning up to the G7, raising the list of complaints that China had lodged, and having Biden and Macron and everyone in the room. And Morrison has brought this to the attention of the world. That was the great thing as we keep reading more about this G7. What a magnificent thing Morrison's done to bring this to the attention of the world. Biden didn't know about it, and he's taken that opportunity. That's not a bigger, that's not as big an issue as him taking a side trip to a cemetery, for goodness sake.
No, Michael Costa, Michael Kroger, I think you're absolutely right. Thank you very much to you both.
Cheers. Thanks, Andrew.